Hello, everyone. It's Dr. Lisa L. Campbell. It's Wednesday, September 20th, 2023. We are in week number 5. One of the reasons that I decided to host this live session is because I'm noticing a trend in what you all are doing from your coding process. And so I want to address them so that you all can move forward and have greater accuracy with your coding. Now, of course, you're not going to be an expert at coding, but some of the mistakes that you guys are making, I believe, are due to not following the rules. So first things first, I'm going to go to content. And I'm going to go to the electronic ICD-10 CM resources. I'm going to grab the alphabetical index to diseases. And then I'm also going to grab the tabular list. So I have them both open in 2 different tabs. So I want to look back at some exercises from last week. And so the first one is from chapter 12, where the patient had a cerebral infarction with left non-dominant hemiparesis. So as a reminder, this electronic book is mirroring the physical ICD-10 CM manual. And just as a side note, I just got a notification literally about 10 minutes ago that the publisher, Optum, they just charged my card for my ICD-10 CM manual, which means that the manual will be in my at my office soon. Now, for those of you who ordered through us through the bookstore, you definitely will want to, check with them. I would say that I'm going to get mine faster because if you ordered it from the school, it has to go to the campus and there's probably a process. Whereas mine is just my one book that's coming to my office. But nonetheless, the coding process has to start in the alphabetical index. And so the condition that the patient has is a cerebral infarction it resulted in non-dominant hemiparesis. One of the things that I will tell you is that if you don't know what words mean, you've got to look them up. So this is an infarction. So I'm going to start with the letter I. And using the magnifying glass, I'm going to tell the system or the file that I want to narrow it down. And so I'm going to infarction. And notice the first thing that came up was some kind of myocardial infarction. But you have to remember that the main term is in bold print. So I'm going to just use this arrow to get me down. This is where infarction begins. In my previous video, I talked about the single line and the double line. And so you see there's cerebella, but that's not ours. We are cerebral. Now, remember, we have to go down to the subterm. And in this particular case, it is an infarction. It is a cerebral infarction. We don't have any other, what do you call it? It's not due to something else. So the index is giving us I63.9 and a hyphen. Well, that hyphen lets us know that it is not a complete code. Also, I want to call out because a couple of you are putting extra spaces in after your decimal point. So I63.9 would be I63, no space, the decimal point, no space, then a 9. If you put in extra spaces, the system is not going to recognize it, okay? So then the next step, which I think some of you are not following, is where you go to the tabular list to verify. So first over here on the left, I'm going to go to I, which is chapter 9, and then I'm going to click on I-60 to I-69. Now, what I also would do is type in I-63.9. So I-63.9 is cerebral infarction, unspecified, and that dash indicating that an additional character was needed, that's actually an error because it's not. So stroke, not otherwise specified. But here's the thing, our patient also had non-dominant hemiparesis. So one rule that you were taught is that you have to read from where your code begins to where your code ends. So there's an excludes to note, which means that 2 codes may be needed. And notice how it says transient cerebral ischemic attacks and related syndromes, G45.9. It doesn't pertain to our scenario. And again, we are in chapter 12 of the basic ICD-10 CM-PCS textbook. The other rule is you always want to go back to the beginning of the 3-digit character for where the code begins, which in this case is I-63. Why? There are generally notes that pertain to that entire section that are placed at the very beginning. So that's I-63.0, I need I-63. So there's a couple of things that we are told. Use additional code to identify status post TPA. That doesn't apply to us. Use additional code to indicate the stroke scale. That doesn't apply to us. Excludes 1 is about if this was a neonate cerebral infarction, which this does not apply to us. And then if the patient has a sequela of a cerebral infarction, look at I-69.3. And again, notice there's a hyphen, I-69.3. So the first thing I would do is in my little box, I'll type in I-69.3. And I-69.3 is not a complete code, right? Remember what we talked about in terms of, and this was presented in chapter 1, coding to the highest level of specificity. So what is the sequela? Could be more than one, but our patient has the non-dominant hemiparesis. So here you have a couple of options. You can scroll down to locate the hemiparesis. And in this case, again, chapter 12, this was left non-dominant hemiparesis, right? And so where is it? I-69.35 category is hemiparesis and hemiplegia that is following a cerebral infarction. So I-69, I-69.354, right? Because that's the left dominant side. So many of you had all kind of answers going on, but I wanted to, walk you through that to show you the process, okay? So there was another one that I wanted to look at. Coronary artery disease in autologous vein bypass graft. So of course, I'm going to go back to the alphabetical index, and I am going to erase this. And my current condition is coronary artery disease in autologous vein bypass graft. So I think I'm not going to go to coronary. That's a body part, right? So I'm going to go to type in or click D and then go to disease, and I want to try to see if this will work. Yeah, disease, heart ischemic. So that's where I need to go. And by typing this in, I'm going to see if it'll get me there. And if not, I'm going to go to disease, erase that out. And remember, when you're looking at a main term, it has to be the beginning of the actual term. And so notice how it's taken me to like all these other terms. And so what I'm going to do is just locate the word disease. Now there's another word that you can use for coronary artery disease, but it's still going to take you back to where you are here. So let me get to disease real quick. And remember, you have to start with the main term that's in the bold print. If you are Googling your answers, one thing I will tell you is that you are starting bad habits that you're going to have to pay for later. When you take your national exam, you have to use your code manuals. And so if you're Googling and you're not using the electronic files, you're setting yourself up for failure, because when you get your manual, you won't be used to this process. Again, the reason that we're using the electronic manual is because there's every single year, we're almost at disease. Every single year, there is a, I had to remember how to spell disease. All right, here we go. All right, so disease, and then we know we go to heart. And remember the single line and the other line. That's why starting in the right place is going to be critical. All right, so we're at disease. And we want heart. Okay, now what about our patient? They have coronary artery disease in an autologous vein bypass graft. So one of the things I'm going to tell you, do not just look up words. If you do not know what the words mean, you've got to look it up. So we see here that if it's artery, arterial, see disease, heart, ischemic, atherosclerotic. So we're already in disease, we're already at heart. So we just have to locate that ischemic. Now, when you get here, there's a couple of things you're going to see. Just plain old coronary artery disease, which is the I-2510. And that's a situation where the patient has not had a bypass graft. You really need to understand your anatomy, your physiology, your terminology in order to code accurately. So since we know that the disease was in an autologous vein bypass, autologous means that they use the patient's own vein to do the bypass graft. Again, if you don't know what words mean, you've got to look them up. All right, so if it is a bypass graft, it's telling us see arteriosclerosis, coronary artery. All right, so I'm going to go back over here. I'm going to click on A. I'm going to type in arterial. It's hard to type and talk at the same time. Arteriosclerosis. And I'm coming on, to show you this book again, because I want to make sure that you are following the correct rules, because some of the chapters that you're getting into are going to be a little bit harder. All right, so arteriosclerosis, and it was of a bypass graft. Don't forget the double hyphen and the single. So this is chronic limb threatening ischemia, critical limb. That's not ours. So you have to go back to the single line. And this is where I think a lot of you got tripped up. You got to go back to the single line where the subterm is going to get us over to the heart. And when you verify the codes, guys, in the tabular, you should recognize when you made a wrong term. All right, so coronary artery here, bypass graft. All right, so the other codes underneath here, notice all the stuff it's got going on with angina pectoris, with an autologous artery. Ours was an autologous vein, so I'm getting close. Autologous vein, I-25.810. The next thing I got to do is verify that code. I believe that, and I could be wrong, that many of you are not verifying your codes, which is what's causing you to get the wrong answer. So atherosclerosis, which is another name for coronary artery disease of a coronary artery bypass graft, the patient doesn't have angina pectoris. All right, so that was another one that I saw that people got wrong. All right. So I was hoping that someone came on tonight, but I'm going to do one more, and hopefully this will get you guys back on the right path. So I'm still in chapter 12. This is the patient who had end-stage renal disease due to hypertension. If you have not noticed this in your chapter readings, which I hope you're reading the chapters, guidelines play a huge role in how successful you're going to be at the coding process. I know for some of you, it might be a little challenging because you are, manipulating your way through this electronic manual. The reason that we are teaching you this system first is because ICD-10 PCS is harder. And for some reason, every year, the ICD-10 PCS manual is the manual that's out first. But we can't teach you that first because it's just too difficult. So hopefully by next week, you guys will have your physical manuals. But I definitely will check with the bookstore. All right. So if you read the chapter in the textbook, you saw the guidelines on hypertension with heart disease, hypertension with renal disease, hypertension, heart, and renal disease in terms of sequencing. And one of the things that I saw was that many of you had the codes in the wrong order. Now, I will tell you that I will be going back. I have not reviewed week 4 yet, really. I will be giving you credit if you had them in the wrong order, only because this is the introduction to coding. But the reason that I hosted this session is because I wanted to make sure that I get you guys back on the right track. Okay, so this patient has end-stage renal disease due to hypertension. So there's a rule about this. And so I'm going to go to hypertension first. Oh, I'm going to click on H first, okay? And then tell the system to get me to hypertension. And there could be a faster way to do this, but this is the way that I think there's some options here. But anyway, I'm at hypertension. Notice under hypertension, it says with heart involvement. So with heart failure, it's giving you some options. Kidney involvement, C, hypertension, kidney. Well, our patient does have end-stage renal disease due to hypertension. So I'm already in hypertension. I'm just going to scroll down to locate that subterm of kidney. And guys, send me an email and let me know if this little video or this live session was helpful. Because even though we don't have live sessions in this class, I decided to do it because I saw that despite the earlier videos that I recorded, some of you are still making the same mistakes. All right, so kidney. I-12.9 is where we start. But when you read the chapter, you learn that there are different stages of kidney, right? So if the patient has stage 5 or end stage, we're directed towards I-12-0. I still have to verify the code, right? I still have to verify the code. So I'm going back over here and I forgot the number. Let's give me a second to refresh this because I don't know what this is doing. All right, so we got the tabular list back up. Okay. So I'm going to say, hey, electronic book, get me over to the I-12 category. And then do my magnifying glass, I-12.9. And I have to tell you, I only use this book when the manuals aren't in. Later in the program, you guys will learn how to use an encoder, but the way to properly, learn how to use the encoder is to first start with the physical code book. So I'm reading I-12.9, which says hypertension due to, that's stage 1 through 4. So that's not mine. All right, I-12-0, hypertensive kidney disease with stage 5 or end stage, that's mine. Use an additional code to identify the stage, N118.5 or N118.6. So a couple of things. If there's a note under the code that you're looking that says use additional code, that means that that additional code goes second, and you still need to go and look up that code to make a decision about what code you need to select, okay? The other thing, don't forget our rule. Go back up to I-12 to see if there are any notes, includes any condition, blah, blah, blah. Get in the habit of doing that because sometimes, a lot of times, they will place a note that pertains to the entire section. They place that at the beginning. Other things that I saw you guys doing, and I'm just gonna, this was in the respiratory system, so I'm just gonna go over to these codes real quick. And since no one is here, and I'm basically talking to myself, I'll just cover this one last thing and then I will be done. So actually there's two things. I'll do this first and then I'll do the other one. So J44 is for COPD. That is not a complete code. And it gives you some very important notes. Includes code also. Use additional code. There's that excludes one note. You have to be in tune with the notes, okay? So one of the things that I saw commonly was the incorrect use of J44.0, J44.1, and J44.9. So what I will say here is that some of you did not read the chapter, I think it was chapter 13, because they explicitly covered this concept, okay? The other thing that I wanted to show you, so go back and look at difference between J44.0, J44.1, and then J44.9. The last thing I wanted to just kind of plant this seed for you all, and that is related to tobacco dependence. I want you to look at F17210. I want you to look at Z87891. I want you to look at Z72.0 and get in your head the differences between them. There are distinct differences. One of them says the patient is dependent on cigarettes, right? One of them says that the patient has a history of tobacco dependence, meaning that they don't do it anymore. And then the other code is they use tobacco, but they're not dependent on it. So F17210, Z87819, I believe is the number, and then Z72.0. All right, guys. Well, no one is here with me. I will post this in the course, and good luck.